Well, good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you for yet another webinar on an ongoing topic that we are very focused on trying to get the message out and trying to help our clients and introduce our new prospects to how are we going to try to help you combat cybercrime. We've had a very interesting last number of months. Last year in 2020, we focused on a lot of different isolated topics on how to avoid cybercrime and ways of combating it. We really focused a lot on the human element, which is still really the glue that holds it all together. But today we're also going to have a renewed focus on the tools that we've talked about when we speak in terms of training and encouraging user best practices. There's a lot of tools that complement those efforts. So today we're going to focus on just the tools and how we can use them and how to leverage them. Before we get started, a couple housekeeping items just for anyone who may be new to our events. We have everyone muted so we don't have any background noise. There is a Q&A window available for you to ask questions. Our moderator today and the person watching those questions is our general manager, George Love. And he will be able to ping me if you have some questions that pop up. I'll do my best to try to answer them during that time, or we'll catch up at the end. There will also be contact information for you to be able to talk or reach out to us if you have some follow-up. Brief history on Lamb Tech. Again, I guess I should have begun with this. My name is Robert Lamb. I'm the CEO and founder of Lamb Tech. Started the company in '99. We cover a very large portion of Missouri. It's a pretty large geographic area, but with technology today, it's a very easy process for us to do. Our focus has always been to align your IT solutions with the growth of your business. Our focus is trying to take care of technology and help manage that so you can do what you do best, which is expanding and growing your business so you can continue to thrive in our economy. And we will continue to fight that IT fight for you. So what do we offer as part of that? Well, we have a few different categories. Of course, security is really a big focus and topic of everyone's conversation, but that still doesn't take the place of providing help desk support that we have available both on-site and remote. We do consulting. That's part of my role within the organization, is to create long-term strategies and solutions for your budgets. George Love also is the key leader in that area. I get involved when it comes to looking at the larger solutioning and financial aspect of things. Data backup and recovery, of course, is a vital component to our package, simply from a standpoint of that's our last line of defense, that should you encounter ransomware or catastrophic failure, theft, or loss, that we do have the ability to retrieve your data. So as we move forward, for anyone who's new, we do have pretty much every month webinars on a variety of topics. We seem to be gravitating as much as possible towards a lot of the different security aspects of things, but we also shake things up and bring in some other vendors in as well, as long as some of our own product and announcements like we're doing today. So if you've missed any of our past webinars, feel free to visit our website. It's at lambtech.com/webinars. There's a lot of rich information, and if you've missed a few of them, you can go back and review those at any time and at your leisure. This event is being recorded, so you will even be able to get this one should you happen to step away or you find some information that you'd like to refer back to. It will be available somewhere post-production after we do this event. So moving right along, again, my name is Robert Lamb, and my catchphrase for today is a strong cybersecurity posture requires a combined investment in training tools and strategy. We spent, I spent a great number of hours talking with clients and doing presentations, really revolving around the human aspect of training and things like that. I still am a firm believer that training is the number one deficiency when it comes to getting employee buy-in on safe practices and being able to operate on a daily basis without presenting additional risk to your IT investment. However, like everything else, we're all busy, and so we have to have tools to help people, and the tools are what we're going to talk about today. So when we look at a cybersecurity strategy, I will warn you and want to set an expectation right up front. You're always going to adapt this strategy. Like everything else, if you've been in business for any number of years, and it doesn't matter if it's 1, 2, or 20 or 30, like some of us, one thing that remains constant is that everything changes. And in technology, that rate of change is exponential. And so we find ourselves where we used to even evaluate different antivirus products, malware products, and things like that, where we'd say, well, we're just set and we haven't changed anything for 10 years. That's no longer the case. So we're always looking at tools and evaluating their value and evaluating their strengths. So change is constant. Change is hard. There's no one size fits all solution. And because of that, as a business owner, if you're focusing on trying to drive the business in the industry that you are successful in, it's next to impossible to also have a clear understanding of the different technologies and strategies there are to secure your network and your digital assets. And when you think in that terms, then that's where people and organizations like Lam Tech come into play. We recognize and we know ourselves it's a challenge. Our leadership group actually reviews almost on a monthly basis our tools and comparing those to additional tools that may be coming new onto the market, and making some choices as far as do they fit with not only our internal infrastructure and strategy, but how would those fit among our client base and other businesses as well. So it's an ongoing journey. It's one that I think that it's exciting at times and sometimes a little bit scary. So moving into this, let's talk about our assets and what we need to know. Now, this slide, pardon me, is somewhat of a summary of things that we've talked about in the last 14 months. You know, we've talked about viruses and malware and drive-by downloads, and the list goes on. And what I wanted to do was kind of package this all up and get it in the top of your mind as we move into talking about the tools and how these map. We try to take and create in our workspace or in our minds, identifying these threats, how we map them to what is going to mitigate that threat, and then if we don't, what's the potential risk, what's the exposure. So in the early days, back when the internet first started, and you know, really that's kind of where the genesis of the virus first came out, because it was something that could be delivered to a mass amount of people. And it's really its only purpose or threat was just to infect the machine and destroy data. There wasn't a mechanism in there for them to, for the virus writers to charge anything. Their big goal was they wanted to claim to fame about, hey, I've infected 10,000, 100,000, 200,000 computers and make the news. And that's really, I mean, if you think about the Melissa worm and some of these other viruses that we, if you can go back far enough and remember them, that was really their only goal, is they were just seeing if they could do it. So there was a period of time where antivirus vendors were making a lot of money. They were making a lot of noise in the industry, and it was necessary because these were just, what they were doing was wreaking havoc on networks, making them unusable. And the whole purpose was that they had to claim to fame, but the downside of it is the businesses either lost data or they were unable to work. So then you fast forward, and now you have malware that's being delivered with those viruses. Now that's where we talk about payload delivery, because that's where we start talking about ransomware and command and control. And if you've missed some of our past webinars, command and control is the one where a little piece of software is delivered on your computer. And then all of a sudden you find yourself where your computer has started taking actions on its own. Well, it most likely is silent. And so now one individual or group of individuals may have access to literally hundreds of thousands of computers to execute commands. So we started getting wise to that, started figuring out how to block it. So then they took it up a notch. They start doing drive-by downloads. It again is a payload delivery system, but this one is really secret in that you can get it by simply going to a normal website and a picture pops up on your website. Well, your computer has to run a program to render the picture. So when the picture runs and that program runs, then what happens is it executes hidden code inside that computer, or inside that image, pardon me. And the next thing you know, you have either ransomware, or you have command and control, or you have other software that's being delivered in that payload. So that's a quick, probably 5 to 8 year cycle and evolution, along with all the other nasty things, but these are the big ones that really are causing havoc in our industry even today. So when we start coming up with new technologies to block drive-by downloads, and it's very difficult to do, and there's no 100% tool that will do this. All you can do is reduce it as much as possible. Then you add in phishing. So phishing, as everyone probably knows by now, is a component that not only just preys on software and maybe unpatched machines and everything, but phishing is actually deliberately going out and trying to trick your users into giving up their credentials, to giving up information that would then that would allow a compromise that leads to system access that's unauthorized, which then kind of trails off into, if they get into your system, they can potentially get into your financial information, and they can also interject themselves into fraud. Excuse me. So here's where things really start getting, if you didn't think they were serious, now they're getting serious for certain, is that the social engineering also allows and opens up a door for an attack that we refer to as the man in the middle. Now, this man in the middle could either be someone just sitting at a Starbucks that's intercepting your Wi-Fi connection and sampling off all the data that you type, or it could be a person who's used phishing and social engineering to get usernames and passwords to your email. And people have asked, well, how do they get in, and how all of a sudden are bank wires being redirected? It's actually not too difficult. The main key element, somewhat redundant, but the main element is that you have an individual who is phished, and they give up their credentials to, let's say, for example, Office 365, Microsoft's hosted email platform. So let's say I get access to those credentials. So I log in and I'm just using the username and password, but I do nothing. I'm kind of like I walk through an unlocked door of your house when no one's home, lights are off, middle of the night, and I'm just walking around. I'm going through all your drawers. I'm looking in your closets. I'm going down in your basement. I'm looking up in your attic. I'm getting familiar with what's there. So I'm in your Outlook and I'm reading your emails. I'm looking at your sent emails. I'm looking at your deleted emails. I have a pretty good feel, especially if I do this over a day or a week's time. So now I kind of know, and let's say, for example, that person is a bookkeeper at a business and they pay the bills. They do bank reconciliations. They send emails back and forth to banks. They manage loans. See the picture I'm drawing? I'm now sitting inside their email, haven't done a thing. All I'm doing is reading. I'm just lurking in there, getting a feel for things. Next thing you know, here comes an email from the bank, like the 15 others that have been in there saying, you know, we've got this bank wire we're going to send out and it's going to this customer. And oh, by the way, you send bank wires to this customer all the time. And so everything looks real routine and I'm confirming the routing number. And then the next thing you know, at 3 o'clock in the morning, I go and send another email disguising, you know, and I'm sending it as the person that I'm impersonating, saying, hey, there's been a change. That $100,000 that we were going to send, I need sent to this new routing number. I forgot to tell you that we've got this new account. And the next thing you know, if there aren't enough checks and balances in there, that $100,000 is sent to another account, or worse, if they're doing online banking, they can go and initiate that all themselves. And so very easily enough, you can have financial fraud. So man in the middle, social engineering, and phishing are probably the three biggest threats when it comes to unauthorized access. You combine that with ransomware and things like that, and it becomes a very concerning world out there. There's a new threat. It's actually not new, but it's something that is growing in presence, is application hijacking. And this is another where you have applications on your machine that are your daily apps, Outlook, Excel, Word, Adobe, tons of different applications. And not ransomware, but other payloads are delivered to take over those applications or impersonate those applications as such that your antivirus software doesn't recognize that these applications are actually operating rogue. And so we're watching it really closely. There's been technology out there that will block a lot of this behavior. A lot of it can be blocked even through group policies, which is not a tool, it's just actually part of the Microsoft operating system. However, the sophistication of these hijackers has grown. And so we're looking at some tools right now. We're not really ready to bring them out yet. We're evaluating those. In fact, we're evaluating them next month. So we're hoping that we'll have a leg up on those. Fortunately, we haven't seen a great deal of that, but application hijacking is also a very significant entry point for the new ransomware that we're seeing coming out to bear as well. So, wow, now we see all the threats, and the big question is well, how do we protect ourselves? So there's 3 areas we're going to discuss today. We're going to talk about the tools. Can't talk about tools without revisiting training and monitoring, and then some clearly defined policies. This isn't tough. It's just, it's hard for us, and I speak in terms of us as business owners because I have the same concerns that all business owners have, is how do I protect our data? How do I protect our clients that we support, and then their clients as well? So it's really just kind of a chain of events. So again, I'm going to kind of go down this list in defenses that a lot of people already have, a lot of businesses already have. When we speak in terms of advanced threat protection, we usually think in terms of firewalls, but I don't want those firewalls to be confused with when you go out to Best Buy or Staples and you say, hey, I've got a new Netgear router with built-in firewall. So yes, those will have some very limited functions. Some of them are getting a little bit more advanced, but the problem with those is they're still kind of a residential grade firewall. So they're somewhat limited in functionality. They may be great for home, but for your business, you really don't want to use anything other than like a Sonic Wall or some of the other ones out there. Cisco has been out forever, but it's extremely expensive, very complicated to set up. And so today, just because I'm going to speak in terms of products and services that we have built our technology stack on, that if you're our client, you will most likely have some, if not all of these, but we're going to talk about the stuff we know, stuff we sell. So for example, the Sonic Wall firewall, this is every client that we have in our managed services family today has a Sonic Wall firewall of one level of another. Depends on the size of the business, what your security footprint is, your requirements and things like that. A lot of people think that a firewall is just a hardware device that sits there, but the reality of it is that there's also a software and service, more of a service subscription, because not only does it act as a hardware appliance that routes data in and out of your organization, but it also is looking at different rogue elements and that's accomplished by packet inspection. And when they're looking at those packets of the data coming in, it's comparing those signatures to other a database of known signature of bad things, and kind of a plethora of additional things, elements that we're looking at that are that could present security risks, like foreign IP addresses, anything that comes in offshore. We can do what's called Geo Fencing and say, if this IP address is coming in from South America or China or Russia, non-US, we can stop that. The problem and the difficulty, that used to be a big claim to fame, is that we'll geofence and you can only get US based. But guess what? We're a global economy. Some companies do have business and interchange with companies outside of the US borders. So we have to be pretty conscious of that when we set up those rules. And just like everything else, those rules change. When you buy devices and even software, sometimes that software is not authored in the US, and so when you go to get updates, it could potentially be blocked. So that's why when you buy a firewall or you get one as part of a service, that people often question about, well, what's this management cost and everything else? Well, it's kind of like if you go to Best Buy and you buy a Netgear router and you put it in, you pretty much you set it and forget it, because they say it's plug and play, right? But so if it sits there for 3 years on your network and no one's touched it or no one's done anything to it, do you think that it's as secure as a Sonic Wall device that is managed and monitored and set up to create alerts that, okay, if a particular event happens, that an email is sent to someone, whether it creates a ticket or just lets someone know? So there's always going to be some additional things that you're going to find quite a lot. And as time goes on, that is even more valuable because even though it's an ongoing investment, you know that device is current and secure. So another add-on tool is that, along with the Sonic Wall, is a virtual private network, or a VPN. Everybody hears VPN, throws VPN around. It's another one of those items that's either hardware or software. If you're on a PC or a laptop, excuse me, and you're sitting at a Starbucks or at an airport, you open up your VPN to connect back to your Sonic wall, and you've effectively extended your network. The goal there is to prevent unauthorized network access by a man-in-the-middle attack. Also, it will help you encrypt your data so that data cannot be sniffed. Excuse me. It cannot be sniffed as it goes across the wire. And so there's definitely some benefits in having vendor-centric type products like that. And there's times where it's good to have some separation, just because that way you have multiple tool sets, but you don't want to get bogged down into too many. So antivirus and anti-malware, we use Trend Micro. They've got a variety of different levels of not only just the basic antivirus and anti-malware, but they're also looking and have the ability to add on layers to that provide analysis of files and who's accessing them and preventing unauthorized file access, or if a file changes unexpectedly to where it can be quarantined and then inspected by actually a human to determine if that was an intended product or an intended change. So that's where it helps monitor for rogue software access. Then we go into the next level, which is email antivirus and anti-spam. I get this question a lot. Well, if I've got Trend Micro antivirus and anti-malware, I should be good, right? Well, you may be on like your personal computers if you're running Trend Personal and things of that nature. And even if you're at work, there's a certain amount of antivirus that happens when you actually open up the email. I mean, if you're not running any type of protection until the email is delivered to your desktop, there is always a potential for an email attachment, a PDF that's actually a virus in disguise, or a Word document or Excel spreadsheet that can incorporate and have viruses embedded in those. But then let's go one step further and look at the content of those emails. And in the message, there can be an email message that's crafted to look like this from the CEO or from FedEx or from Amazon. That's a shipping notification that turns out to be phishing. It's a harmful link. Maybe it's encouraging you to download your bill. Hey, your bill's past due. I'm going to help you out. Here's a link. Click here to download your bill, and then that way you'll know. Well, that's all very easy to do. And when you have an antivirus and anti-spam software that's specifically for emails, it's a service that actually runs through this. They scan those for harmful links, and they will flag those as such. And if they're bad enough, they'll strip them out. A lot of this we've gone over, and I understand that, but I'm wrapping it all into one big package for you. So multi-factor authentication, we use a product called Duo. Additionally, we may use Microsoft's two-factor authentication. The Duo is kind of our center point on this. They're hardware or software enabled, either via a token, or you can have a app on your phone. Sometimes, depending on what phones you're using, sometimes it will extend to your watch. But the whole idea there is that in my previous explanation, or my example that I provided on logging into Microsoft's Outlook through Microsoft 365 as a unauthorized user, if that user had been using two-factor authentication, it would have made my access a lot more challenging, if not impossible to do. So that's why we really are excited about multi-factor. It's not too expensive. It's not too difficult to use and to train users on. You combine that with the next item of password manager. We talk about passwords being a weakness. They definitely are. I think if we had a show of hands with our users today and asked them how many are using the same passwords on a number of different accounts, you'd still probably get a surprising number of hands go in the air. And the only way that we can do that is make it easy for them to keep track of their passwords. So the password manager is great for that. We use Lastpass. We actually did a webinar on Lastpass and how it works. I encourage you to go back and look at it if you don't recall it or if you missed it. But it helps us help your users to accept that, hey, I'm going to have really hard passwords. I don't have to try to remember them. I certainly don't want to write them down. I have them stored in an encrypted location. I can access them via phone. I can access them via a tablet. I can access them via a website. So there's lots of options there. So all of these that we've introduced today are working tools. They work well, and they're not too difficult. And once people get in the rhythm of using those, I think if anyone's remembered some of my past webinars, a favorite phrase of mine is muscle memory. And once you start using these, they just become commonplace. And so what we want to try to do is make this as attractive and cost effective as possible for ownership, but attractive to the users so they actually utilize these tools and help protect your systems. The application whitelisting, again, we'll talk about that more, but I want that to start kind of getting into your mindset just a little bit, because we're going to see more of that, and I expect with over the next few months we'll see some more discussion with you about that. So we covered somewhat tangible items, whether it's a piece of hardware or software and subscription tools to harden those defenses. But it still doesn't go without us talking about training and monitoring. We want to educate and validate our success and alert when we discover that your password has been hacked or somehow has made it out into the wild. Because the worst time to find out that your passwords are compromised is after you've been hacked. So we have engaged with a number of our clients and done some on-site training, user training. We've done a number of Zoom trainings over the last year, and I think we have some more in front of us. But I encourage you to take advantage of this service. I think your users will get a lot out of it. I do that training. George has done that training as well. But it certainly is something that you want to try to get on your calendar. The big thing is that how many times have you held a training class for some product, policy, change, new piece of equipment or whatever, and you've trained and you think, well, it's one and done, where everybody knows how to use it and we're done. The reason that it's probably effective is especially if it's like an application, they're probably using that all the time. And so they're challenged to think and remember what you said and utilize that information. When you start talking about training against how you work, whether it's reading emails, sending emails, talking on the phone, answering the phone, things like that, that kind of gets lost because we've all been talking on the phone 20, 30, 40 years. Your users, even your younger users, their way of life is all about communicating. And we're talking about trying to encourage people to communicate differently with phishing tests and breaking bad habits of automatically getting in a hurry and click. Speed and urgency are the biggest devils of trying to get people to slow down and read an email. Everybody's texting. SMS, short message. But the problem of it is that's how a lot of these people are tricking folks to open emails. So if you're going to have training, it's especially in the arena of cybersecurity, you really need to audit or validate the effectiveness of that training. And the only way you can do that is by periodically sending random tests and seeing how people perform. We've done this for clients, and at the first round was kind of, it was okay. And then some people just stop right there and go, well, I guess the training didn't work. Well, the reason it didn't work is because we trained and then we fished, then we discovered some deficiencies, but nothing ever happened after that. So that's where the accountability comes in. And so we try to work with our clients and say, okay, when we start this, we want to set this expectation from beginning to end, or actually it's never an end, but the end of the cycle, saying, okay, what's going to happen if we do the first phishing test and you have 60%, 70%, 80% failure? And if you get an answer that says, okay, well, I don't know, we'll probably sit and talk with them. Well, that's okay, but you need to be prepared on what you're going to say, why this is important to the company and why it's important to them. And then maybe the second time, if there's a continued failure of an individual or group of individuals, what's going to be your next step? Because if you just continue to let it slide, then what's the point of even doing the training? So there has to be some accountability. We have some organizations that are more financial driven. They have compliancy issues that have some very strict accountability clauses that are right in there, and they're incorporated into HR policy, just like showing up to work late 3 times or unexcused absences or whatever those might be. If they're failing these tests, there are some very severe things that can happen to them, up into possibly losing their job. Now, we're not encouraging people to be fired over this, but there is a level of accountability that must be established so what we're doing works, because we're all trying to make sure your data is safe. The last thing that I started off with, which is the dark web monitoring, is that just like that user or that hacker lurking in the background that has used or stolen your password, oftentimes what we find, and what has been actually demonstrated and established, which is why there are now dark web monitoring services, is that people are combing the internet, finding your email addresses, and then they're trying to use phishing to get you to give up those credentials. They're possibly not even trying to do that so they can go out and perform the illegal deed itself. What they're trying to do is build a database of known usernames and passwords that they can sell on the dark web, hence dark web monitoring. So we use a service that does nothing but comb these dark web places, and then they search in those databases for email addresses or domains that are in our client base, in our managed client family, and then we get notified if one of those username email addresses pops up with a credential. And so it's a more proactive approach, especially if this was maybe a new email address and password that was just discovered yesterday. And oftentimes if we get we've had probably a dozen or half a dozen of these over the last 6 or 8 months, where we've called the client and that specific user and said, hey, I'll just say George because I'm picking on George, but George, are you using the password of school is fun? And he's like, yeah. Well, it's been hacked and we need to change it. And we have called high-level people in companies, and it really spooked them because they said, yes, that's my most recent password. But here was the kick. I've been using it for like 2 or 3 years. Well, we probably need to examine your password change process so we can avoid that kind of thing. That's why it's so important. I mean, we've discovered passwords that were 5, 6 years old, and they were still being currently used. And it's hard to know to change these when if you put a list of all your passwords together, you may have 100 passwords, if not more, that you've used over the years. And if you use it all in the same place, but you never go back to that account anymore, and then an account gets compromised, you'll never know. Well, that's what dark web monitoring will do for us. So gosh, that's fun, isn't it? Well, so that's training and monitoring. And then the last element that we talk about is policy. And guess what? This one's free. So policies are things that your IT vendor can reinforce within your network. And it really just is going to be presented as as an inconvenience and a pain to your users, but it addresses a lot of the key issues that I just spoke of. A lot of folks are still not using complex passwords, and we're now seeing an industry shift towards using passphrases instead of complex passwords. The difficulty with it, and the thing that I find disappointing, is that there's still a lot of online vendors that won't accept a passphrase that has punctuation and things like in it. So we still have to use complex passwords as well. But again, policy driven. Frequent password changes. If everybody were to virtually hold their hand up, how many people require in their organization that a password changes? And I don't mean that it goes from password to password 1 to password 2, but where it's actually a complete different word, different iteration, not the same spelling, but a complete different password. And that's another key thing, because a lot of these people who are running these programs to hack passwords, that's what they do, is they'll just start this randomizer of taking the word password and trying it in every way, shape, or form to create a password that will hit. And then finally, one that that started out really and was almost required in the banking industry was access device restriction. And before we even had wireless, where it was even available for use in banks, even on wired devices, the computers, printers, things of that nature, they had a policy that was restrict all and allow few, which essentially boiled down to a workstation with a machine, every machine or every PC, or let me break it down differently, everything with an Ethernet address, an Ethernet plug, had a machine address hard-coded into the hardware of that machine. And so we would actually have to go in and say only these machine addresses were allowed access. And so by then, what that means is that if somebody walked in with a laptop and sat at a desk and just tried to plug in, they wouldn't even be able to get access to that network. And we're doing that at more and more companies that are really taking hardened security to the next level. And it's not that difficult. I mean, think about it. Most companies are pretty static and don't change on the PCs and number of devices that they bring in and out. And so it's really not too difficult to set that up. So we've seen the 3 different ways to look at it. Let's wrap it in to how this all looks in one big picture. So on the left, we started out with general viruses, and they were addressed by anti-malware. We went to remote hackers. DOS stands for denial of service attacks. That's where we started using advanced threat protection, like really good enterprise grade firewalls like SonicWall. Then we get into the email arena with spam, embedded links, stolen credentials, and we map that to antivirus, antivirus and spam, encryption and multi-factor authentication. And as you can see, the chart moves on. This wraps up everything we talked about it all in one slide. I know I could have just skipped this slide, saved everybody some time, but I like to have fun. And so when we get to that, then you say, well, where do I go next? Well, let's identify real quickly what you have. It's 10:45. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but go back and look again at your network. And this is something that we will do with you if you invite us to help. Is we will look at your risk. We look at the type of remote access, if you have any. We've seen a huge jump in remote access with home workers and things like that, which presents an entirely new line of things to consider. Hosted applications, whether they're just your online, your email, or also your line of business apps. And then if you do have that, how are you backing them up? Your business operation, financial and banking, how do you manage that? HR and payroll. If your accountant is doing your payroll for you, you need to know what their backups are should they have some type of a network failure or interruption. You don't want to miss payroll because of that. So this is where, by extension of companies or vendors or professionals that you're using, you need to hold them accountable for what kind of systems they're using and what they have in place to protect your data. And then finally, again, employees, you want to get them trained. You want to make them accountable. You want to have documented on what network and data resources they have access to as well. One item that I always will mention is a term that's industry known as shadow IT. I think everybody in business has a friend, a relative, an in-law, a fellow business peer that knows IT. And it's not a dig against them. They probably do. My question for you to ask yourself is, are they an IT professional that's all they do all the time? Because what happens is somebody will have a base knowledge of how to throw in a firewall or an access point that they get from Staples. And I'm not just Staples, I should just say big box store, but in any regard, and they put it on your network. And great, hey, it works. Now I've got wireless and I didn't have to pay that company to come in and do it. I know that company is me, but the reality of it is that unless there's additional things set up to limit what that access point does, or to at least know and document what it does, it's very easily just like having your house that's secure and locked, but then someone else comes in and cuts a window in it, but they didn't put any locks in, and it's in the back of the house. Sometimes people even forget it's there, and then next thing you know, your house has been ransacked and they came in through that window. So that's my word of caution on using easy and hey, this isn't a problem type of let's add this onto our system, because if you don't have that managed or monitored, you can't manage it. So that you might want to just think about that before you kind of stray off that trail of security. So how do you rate your threat potential? What is your threat potential, and then what is its risk? So of those ones that we limited, these are the 6 areas that we want you to reflect upon and say, okay, on my malware and my antivirus, what am I using? What do I have in place today? Is it freeware? Is it commercial? Is somebody managing it? Is it on all my devices? We've come into places where, yeah, we've got antivirus. It's on 6 of their 10 machines. The other 4 they bought later. We didn't want to buy the new antivirus, and it comes with that new Windows Defender. So I'm sure it's fine. But again, it's kind of like having that window back there that's not being watched. How are you protecting against drive-by downloads? Do you have an endpoint antivirus solution? That would be the software that's inside that firewall. Are there rules in that firewall about monitoring and what to do and restrictions? And is it real-time scanning? So, every one of these phishing, again, we're talking user training and validation, social engineering. Social engineering has been a big thing lately. I just heard an unfortunate story where we had one of our employees was out of town, and his father-in-law got a phone call from Amazon about a credit card charge, and had him on the phone for an hour and a half. And it turned out that, of course, we all know that it was bogus. And so, he's going to have to dig into his computer to see what's going on. When we strongly discourage our clients from putting customer testimonials on their website. And I mean, who would not want to do that? I mean, we're proud of all of our customers, but you won't find them on our website anymore because we're afraid that somebody's going to call and say, yeah, I'm Bill from Lam Tech. I'm new here and I'm having trouble getting a hold of your computer. So could you help me and let me walk you through it? These people spend hours, if not days, targeting people. That's how come they're so successful. And that's how come they have these big paydays. Man in the middle attacks, the same thing. They're stealing data, and so you need to evaluate, do we have VPNs? Do we use multi-factor authentication? I just use red, yellow, and green because there's hundreds of different ways to score this. I mean, for example, we've got a spreadsheet that we use with new prospects, and when we're reevaluating things, that on just 6 topics, we've got over 36 questions that we answer that will rate a different score. It helps us determine what their cyber standpoint is. Where do they stand? So, it's just one of those things that, if you don't know what you need to evaluate, you don't know where to begin. And this is what we do, and we do for you and with you. This isn't a, hey, we just fly in and take care of it all, because no one's different. Remember the very first couple slides. There's not an end all to be all to fix it and address these issues. And some people may not have any concerns about application hijacking, but phishing, because they are so dominant use of email that they need to be able to combat phishing. So we identify where the weak points are. We try to strengthen those, and we try to strengthen your position. So we get to a point now where it says, well, where the big question is, well, man, how much is this going to cost me? This sounds expensive. And you know what? It kind of is. So, we talk about dark web monitoring. We talk about phishing. We talk about advanced threat detection in Microsoft and secure email services, multi-factor. I'm just reading the list. You guys can see the list. Those components right there are about $35 a month, $420 a year per user. Shakes out on a full-time FTE, full-time equivalent, by 20 cents an hour. But think about this. A single cyber event, that can be bank fraud, it could be somebody breaking in and stealing CAD software, it can just be huge. A system-wide event, ransomware, or just crashing your data, is going to cause a great amount of disruption. And to try to keep things somewhat palatable, let's just say an average employee is $15 an hour. You burden them with taxes and benefits, they're at $18.75 an hour. So when you do that, and then you start looking at some costs involved, let's say you've got 5 employees and they're at $15 an hour. Your cost is $93.75 for those 5 employees. Now, a ransomware or let's just say a cyber event, anything that can cause a disruption. I don't necessarily like calling it downtime, because the argument can be made that, well, part of our services are working. maybe we can still get our email, or maybe I can still do spreadsheets, or maybe I have access to some of my files. So let's just say that it's a disruption. And let's say you've got 8 hours of disruption. That's a cost of $750 if all 5 of those employees are disrupted and can't do their work. And that's your $15 base employee. If you get to 16 hours, then it's $1,500. And you get to a break even of 22.4 hours. And if you look at that, because it's $420 per employee, right? So it's a $2,100 spend to protect those 5 employees, protect your network based on those number of users. So I guess as long as you say, well, as long as I'm not out of commission for 22.4 hours, then I probably didn't save any money. But one thing to remember, we are talking about burden people cost. What type of business do you have, and how do you generate your revenue? Have you ever sat and said, okay, I'm $1 million company and I have those 5 employees, and somehow they're contributing to the generation of that revenue? And so you need to be able to put a number on, okay, if I can't operate and generate that revenue, then that should also be added to the cost of that outage. Now, the challenge here, both I challenge you and people challenge me, is that, well, really only 2 people are contributing to that. The other people are supporting those 2 people, but it's still a team effort. Another thing is that they'll say, well, with the kind of way that we do business, if I'm closed for 3 or 4 days, I don't lose money because I'm going to get it back. We're going to get our bills and everything else. But that disruption, we have also a consideration of recovery. So let's say instead of just those 5 people being out of work, let's say that your accounting files got corrupted and you got to go back in and do a week's worth of reentry. So let's say now that your accounting professional, your bookkeeper, who they may be working at a rate of $25 an hour or $31.25 burdened, and they have an assistant that's helping them do key entry and they're $18.75 burdened, and they're working for 40 hours, now your cost is $2,000 for that cyber event. Again, the argument comes back, well, we're already paying them, they're already there. Well, does that mean all of the work that they are not being able to work on for those 40 hours is just going to magically work out? Or is somebody going to have to pick up that slack? You're going to have to hire a temp? Or you're going to have to work overtime? I mean, this can be a very long and drawn out debate. And it's really not intended to create a debate. It's to create this sense of what is your tolerance of risk? How much can you afford to have people be stressed out, get behind, and everything else? We've seen in these past 18, 20 months, we have seen what happens to people who get burned out. They leave their job. And that's probably a very over dramatic way of stating and looking at things. But, we're really trying as business owners to keep happy employees and make things work. But we also need to make our customers happy. So if our customers are expecting a deliverable, but you can't ship, you can't provide a document, you can't email because your systems are down, or you can't do a payroll or whatever, imagine if your accountant or your bookkeeper or your outsourced PE company that's in charge of your payroll and benefits, they're down and you've got 5 employees that can't get paid. Well, they're going to be unhappy. So that's why we look at just not, it's so easy to just draw a correlation between the cost of the tool and your employee cost, and then saying, well, if you're down for 40 hours, it's going to cost you X. Well, there's so many more variables, and those are the variables that we will try to set and go over with a customer. And sure, people say, well, you're just trying to sell stuff. Well, I guess in a way we are, but we feel confident in that there's value in what we suggest and recommend. There's value in the way that we handle it, and we feel that our value proposition to our customers is that, again, that I call it kind of the marketing phrase of everybody in our industry, is that we focus on your IT so you can focus on your business. But the reality is we do IT. That's what we do. That's the world we live in. It's not the world you live in. But we don't profess to be payroll professionals. We don't profess to be draftsmen and CAD people and things like that. But we want to make your systems be able to work as best as they can, so your applications perform and you can do your job without all the headaches that go along with it. So that's a little bit of my ROI model for you. We could spend so much more time just talking about ROI and things like that, but I think you kind of can walk away now with maybe a little bit more of a sense of our motives. I see we've struck 11 and went a minute past, and I'm sorry for that. But I will have, it looks like I do, I'm sorry, I just saw a question pop up about how many times through the year are recommended and how long are the best end user training sessions. Well, we tailor these sessions to, depending on how we deliver, whether it's on-site or virtually. Virtual sessions, we typically will run about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes because we don't want to lose people. I mean, it's 11:02 now. I'm going to start losing you guys if I'm not hurried. But we want to make sure that we cover all the bases. As far as the frequency, depending on the size of your organization, a lot of times we will, if it's for an organization, for a specific organization, we will record that session, and then you can use that as part of your onboarding for new hires. Oftentimes, like here, we do a lot of onboard training for new engineers that we hire. And so they go through a lot of different training and webinars and face-to-face things. So we would definitely want you to do with your new onboards. We would like to be able to come in or meet virtually at least a couple times a year. Sometimes we'll just be added to the agenda of a company meeting. That seems to be a nice time because everybody's brought together. So there's a lot of variables and times that we can do that. If you have an interest in something like that, we'd certainly be willing to help you out. You can either talk with George or Doug Sokolowski about that. Either one of those guys can schedule my time. But George, do we have any other questions that have popped up?
Nope, that was it. You'd answer the rest of them.
All righty. Well, I want to thank everybody. I'm sorry we ran just a little bit long today. If you do have any other questions, please feel to reach out. Doug is a good center contact. He kind of keeps George and I in check, and his information is up on the screen. But I do appreciate your time, and thank you so much, and hope you guys have a great rest of the day.